Alright, today we're doing a brisket on the Masterbuilt 800. Starting off, this is a packer. I don't remember the weight on it, but I guess that never really concerns me. Starting this off, I just want to clear it up that I don't go by any specific time restriction. I follow temperatures, and I always cook to probe tenderness on my briskets. So just a heads up, if you're looking for a time on what this is, I don't know. But either way, just starting the trim. This is a full trim. I have it sped up here, but just keep in mind that I do trim this whole brisket in this video, and it is a substantial amount of time of the video, I guess. But so if you don't want to see all the trimming, you can go ahead and skip past this part. But for the most part, yeah, I try to make the brisket as aerodynamic as possible for good smoke coverage and whatnot. I get rid of any big portions of fat that aren't going to render down. Right now I'm just kind of going around the outside, cutting that little skirt off on the outside, kind of getting a thickness gauge of how thick the fat is around the outside. You'll see I'll end up actually removing a lot of the fat around the point of the brisket. This is a pretty well marbled brisket. The flat had a decent fat cap on it. It kind of had some spots. You can kind of see them there in the middle where the actual point comes to an end. Nothing I can really do about that, but yeah, just kind of picking off any little things sticking up that I don't like, that are just gonna crisp up and burn anyway. I get rid of those. I try to, like I said, make it as aerodynamic as possible. Try to get as many round edges as I can so smoke rolls over it nicely. Using a new knife set I actually got, ordered from Knife Box Freak is the name of the company, and he runs his page through Facebook and does a really good job. Very affordable knives, handmade. He customizes them exactly how you ask, and he's very fair to work with, and it's fast shipping. I highly recommend him. He didn't sponsor this video in any way, but I'm giving him a shout out because I'm very happy with these knives. I got a nice slicing brisket knife, and I got 2 of these boning fillet knives specifically for brisket, so pretty happy with them. So as you can see, I removed some of the fat off the point, top side of the point. The entire point is marbled with fat already. There's really no need for having these big fat chunks around the outside. It won't render down. You'll end up just having kind of a mess and a lot more fat than you need. Great trimmings used for beef tallow. I didn't on this one turn them into beef tallow, but it's definitely something you could do. Got a few little lacerations on the top from the initial cut. So trying to just even those out. Don't want any weird crevices or holes or slices in there. Kind of picking away at this this fat seam here that's between the point and the flat. Runs all the way through, pretty thick fat seam. So I pick away as much of that as I can without leaving a weird flap of point on the top. This is kind of a Texas style brisket that we're doing today. I'm just going to use salt and pepper, nothing else. I don't use a binder or an injection on this one. I'm smoking it at 225 with a water pan. I'm not going to be spritzing this one. I'll be using a water pan. And I'm using hickory and apple. So here I'm just kind of showing that the thickness of the brisket where I want the thickness, and then there's that little point there that it's just a little too thin. Honestly, it would have turned out okay, but for me, I just don't like messing with it. I don't like taking the risk of having dried out brisket flat, so I cut that off. Essentially, it's just a little too thin for me. It's kind of hard to keep the temp on that thin of a piece of brisket while maintaining the same consistency as it gets thicker as it moves out. So I usually just cut that off, round it off. I know it might seem wasteful, but it's just one of those things that I try to take as much time as I can now in the beginning, in the prep and in the after slice, and honestly it makes the smoke go really smooth and you end up with a better looking product in the end. Feel free to keep that on if it's thick enough. In this scenario it looks somewhat decently thick enough, but it was only maybe just over an inch thick, so I cut it back to where it was at least 1.5 inches, 1.75 inches. Again, I'm just trimming off any little thing I can see that's sticking up that is just gonna burn up in the smoker. Like I said, the more love and tender care you put into it now, the better it's gonna roll for you. So that's the top side of the flat there, and that's why I started the video out. I was chopping that. I was trying to get some of that silver skin off and just the big patches of fat. Here I'm just cutting off again just this big pile of fat that's on the back side of the point, or of the point. There was just no need for it. The whole thing is marbled nicely. It's not going to render. It's not going to do it. It's just going to make a mess. It's going to ruin your slice later after your bark is nice and set. So again, just cutting off the edges there. There was no need for this cut. It just it had a little grayness to it that I didn't care for, so I cut it off. Trimming your brisket, you just got to have the no looking back mentality. Once you cut it, it's gone. There's, you know, no looking back. It's make it as aerodynamic as possible, and you know, it's worth losing a few inches off of each slice in the first 3 or 4 inches than it is having an entire brisket look funky or cook wrong. Again, I'm just using salt and pepper. I always start with my salt base, and I go pretty heavy on this. I like a nice salt bite to the brisket. I know I go kind of heavy on the pepper too, but the salt, I go heavy on the salt with the brisket. It just seems like it's such a thick slice that you get, and the cross section of rub that you get with the brisket is so small. I like to pack on the salt just so that it does carry that salt flavor through with the beef. Since I don't actually salt or season any of my slices after the fact, I just eat them sliced, so I like having a nice salt layer. And I didn't use a binder on this one, so I do kind of push with my hand, and then I hit it again with the salt. Same with the pepper. I do a layer, push it in, do another layer, and then flip it, do the other side, and then I'll flip it back one more time and just hit it again. And that's just to kind of hit any spots that are missed. Feel free to put your rub on however you want. Rubs go great too. They make for a nice bark, and you do want the whole thing covered. I prefer just the salt and pepper, kind of the Texas style rub. I feel like I get plenty of flavor with just the salt and pepper. I go heavy with it, but it really does just complement the beef flavor. And then another heads up on this, I'll be using the Masterbuilt Gravity Series 800. It doesn't throw as heavy a smoke directly onto the meat like a normal charcoal wood smoker would. The smoke flavor is always there, but you might notice in a stick burner or in a bullet smoker of some sort that it seems like when the heat and smoke from the wood are coming right over the meat, it darkens up a lot faster. You know, unless you're using some kind of a sugar or you don't wrap it, you won't get that black color for a bark. You get pretty dark though, but again, it doesn't happen until probably close to around 180 to 190 degrees internal temp. Here I am checking just every couple of hours. I'm checking again. I'm not spritzing. I'm using a water pan. I got temp probes in the flat and in the point. This is a little trick for people using the Masterbuilt Gravity Series. Throw your wood in, give it a good tap on the grate, and you'll drop those embers down to ignite the wood. It really aids in getting that smoke flavor pushed out. And I restocked the wood every couple hours. Here I am just checking. This is the next day. I smoked it all through the night. This is probably around 13 hours here, 12, 13 hours. You can see we're at 194 in the flat, 189 in the point, and now we're actually getting to where I like the bark. It's got a nice dark color to it, a little bit of mahogany underneath. That's about where I like my bark. You can see there off the grill that. This is how I wrap. Use butcher paper, two sheets together. Get it started, fold them both out, get a few layers around it. Most people will tell you wrap at 165, that's 100% fine. If you're in a time crunch and you want to get through that stall, that's the time to do it. You will not get the bark you're desiring though, unless you're using some kind of specialized rub or sugar. It didn't take long after that. It got to 203. I let it go to about 204 when it was probe ready, probe tender, sorry. And I threw it in the oven to rest for an hour, and I usually go no less than an hour on the rest. And here she is after the rest. Yeah, that looks a good looking bark there. I like that. I found if you don't spritz and you can just use the water pan, that your bark will set up a lot nicer with that texture. Not just the color, but the texture. If you start spritzing too early, you really will wash off your salt and pepper. Still looks nice, and it'll darken up nicely, just won't have that texture to it. And this again is that new slicing knife I got here. I use it specifically for brisket. There you go. Great fold. She pulled, you know, probably just a smidge. I probably could have left her on another degree, I would say. But super tender still. I didn't have a single problem with this. It had good moisture for just running a water pan, not spritzing. And again, that's going to vary too on the brisket that you get, the fat content that you're using. I usually go a little light on the fat. My wife actually doesn't prefer a fatty brisket, so we do lose a little bit of moisture in that. But and there's that fat seam, squeezing the fat out of there. And this is, I just turned it now, I'm cutting the point. And I always cut that first slice or two somewhat thin so I can kind of see the cross section of what it's going to look like. And then I go off from there. I'll start deciding the thickness I want. And I decided at that point in time that I was actually going to cube these. Not necessarily to make burnt ends, but it basically just ends. It wouldn't, just not burning them with a sauce or anything. Yeah, turned out really good. Nice smoke ring. Good fold. Really good flavor. And there's Chief. He loves himself some brisket. Alright, take care. Till next time.